Storytime about my extremely creepy neighbors. So a little background information, I was 12 years old and I was in 6th grade, and my family and I lived in a really small town where everyone knew everyone. But our new neighbors had been building their house next to us for the past 4 years. And finally, when they were done with the house, this house was huge. I mean, probably because there were like 8 people moving into the house. There was the mom, the dad, 4 kids, and their grandparents. So like 8 people. But I was super excited because I was like, okay, this is awesome. I get to meet some new friends. But after 2 weeks of not seeing anybody playing in the backyard or anybody on the school bus, I started to think that their family was super fucking weird. And everyone in our neighborhood liked to gossip, and everyone was saying how they barely see the people who had just moved in. So my mom decided to take one for the team and make some brownies, take them over to the house, and I ended up going with her. So we go up to the house, we knock on the door, and one of the kids came and opened the door, but the dad ran over and grabbed him, like for part 2. Part 2 about my extremely creepy neighbors. So like I said, my mom and I took some brownies over there, and one of the kids opened the door, and when he opened the door, he had a bunch of bruises all over his body. The dad came running over and ripped his son from the door and slammed the door in our faces, and all you could hear was him screaming at his son. So my mom and I went to walk away before the door opened, and he was like, sorry, my son knows better than to open the door to strangers. So he took the brownies, and then I asked him if I could have a sleepover with one of his daughters, and he was super hesitant at first, but he said that I could only have a sleepover with her if it was at my house and not theirs, which my mom was completely fine with anyways, because she thought that it was a little bit weird that his son had bruises covering his whole body. So that night when she came over to sleep over my house, I asked her how her brother got all those bruises all over his body, and she said that he just fell down some stairs. But after that, we became best friends, and we would literally hang out like 5 times a week, until the one day I knocked on their door to ask if she wanted to come over, and her dad answered the door and said that she was gone. Like for part 3. Part 3 about my super creepy neighbors. So like I said, I became best friends with their daughter, but the one day I went over her house to ask if she wanted to come over, and her dad answered the door and said that she was gone. And when I asked when she would be back, he was like, she went to go live with her mom, so probably never. Which was super weird because she never mentioned that she had another mom. So fast forward 2 months, my family and I are sitting around the fire pit when we hear someone scream help. But we weren't sure if that's what we were actually hearing because it was so quiet, and then all of a sudden we heard someone banging on my neighbor's basement door. You know those metal doors that people usually have outside of their house that lead down basement steps? Yeah, well that's where the banging was coming from, so my dad hopped over the fence to see if that's where the screaming was coming from also. And then not even a minute later, my dad hopped back over the fence and it looked like he saw a ghost, but he ran inside, called 911. Because I was so young, the only thing my parents told me about that whole situation was that the girl that I was friends with was still alive and her parents were keeping her in the basement along with 2 of her other siblings. But then we also found out that they weren't even her real parents. They were kidnapped at the hospital when they were born.
Am I wrong for refusing to see other options for a girl and pressing charges for what she had done to my son's car? My 39 male, son 17 male, Bryce dated our neighbor Lana, 17 female, for a year. They broke up mid-January for reasons I don't know. I won't sugarcoat this. I never liked Lana. She always seems a little unhinged, controlling, and aggressive. She's always demanding Bryce's attention, and there was quite a few times when she showed up to our house out of nowhere. Whether it was 7 a.m. or 11 p.m. because Bryce wasn't answering his phone, screaming and calling him a cheater when it wasn't like that. The thought of our son getting abused by his girlfriend made us worry so much. My wife and I tried to talk him out of that relationship. We said how it wasn't normal nor healthy. We didn't want to force the breakup because we feared Lana would lash out on him, so we tried to do it in a sneaky way. We don't know if it worked, but they ended up breaking up. He said that after he broke up with Lana, she didn't contact him, which was weird because she expected her to go nuts, but I told him that if fate didn't give him shit, he better not tease it. Now, the problem is that we bought my son a car for Christmas. Nothing fancy, just enough to get him to school, his job, and eventually college. He parks it in our driveway outside our home. Ever since the month began, we had been finding scratches all over the car. We knew Lana was doing this, but since it was minimal, my son decided not to do anything, even if we could prove that it was her. We have CCTV. Still, something felt bad to me, so I decided to switch one of the cameras facing his car directly just in case. Well, 2 weeks ago, we got up and we found my son's car covered in a lot of shit. Paint, glue, feathers, confetti, the door handles were wrecked, flat tires, paint all over the windows, you get the picture. Bryce and my wife were so distraught. We called the police and handed them the CCTV of Lana and her brother, 23 male, destroying my son's car. We pressed charges, and needless to say, Lana's brother went straight to jail. But since she's still a minor, her parents want to make a deal, but I refused. I don't think she should get a way out. Before the police was here, she was laughing her ass off and she tried to play it cool. If she thought this was funny, then she's old enough to face the consequences. My wife and I want to stand our ground, but her parents say they'll buy my son a better car and put Lana in therapy, but it's not enough. So, am I the asshole?
Am I the asshole for encouraging my ex-husband to take a DNA test and potentially destroying his family? Me and my ex-husband James tried for 7 years to have a baby, and James didn't like to go to the doctor to solve fertility things. He even encouraged me not to have annual checkups at the gynecologist. He blamed me for being infertile and that I was unable to have our children. We broke up after he accused me of being a sterile bitch. The plot twist is that after meeting my current husband and we started trying, I decided to go to the hospital and check out my fertility problem. To my shock, everything is healthy and I could have had a child for years probably. The doctor pointed out the possibility of James's infertility. Am I the asshole for encouraging my ex-husband to take a DNA test? Now I have 3 children, 4 male, and 2 female. James and I still have mutual friendship and have already met after the divorce. I hadn't seen him though in 3 years until recently. I met up with James and we started talking, and he said he was engaged and had a 7-month-old son. I said that I have 3 children, and he said, "I'm happy for you. You managed to solve your infertility and got your family." I giggled and said, "Honey, infertility wasn't on my side. I was able to have kids with you too." Well, yesterday, the now ex-fiance called me raging because he got a DNA test and the baby isn't his. Am I the asshole for refusing to grieve with my wife after my aunt's passing? I, 35 male, am married to Jess, 26 female. We dated for 2 years and have been married for 1 now. Most of my family has passed away, but I had one aunt from my mother's side. My aunt Jill took an active role in raising me when my mother was unable or unwilling, which was often. I got the news that my aunt Jill passed away and was in shock. I told Jess, who was sympathetic at first, and told her I wanted to be alone. I went to my room, and at some point Jess knocked on the door that I needed to talk about it. I said I appreciated it, but just needed to be alone. She then said I was an emotional black hole, slammed my door shut, and literally stomped away. Am I the asshole for refusing to grieve with my wife after my aunt's passing? For the next 2 hours, every 10 to 15 minutes or so, Jess would open my door abruptly and half shout asking if I was ready to be an adult. I grew impatient until I finally stood up and went out for a walk. When I got back an hour later, the chain was locked on our front door, which we never use. I repeatedly knocked and pushed the doorbell until Jess said that she'd only let me in if I agreed to talk about what happened. I said no when Jess walked away, but eventually she unlocked it because I kept pounding on the door and she didn't want me to embarrass her in front of the neighbors. She's now furious at me, saying I'm not really grieving and need to let her in on my feelings.
Storytime, I didn't know that I was dating my best friend's brother. So a little background information, I was 17 and a junior in high school. And I know you guys are probably thinking, how the fuck didn't you know that you were dating your best friend's brother? And we're gonna call my best friend Rima, and we're gonna call her brother Alex. So I had met Alex whenever I was in 5th grade. We never hung out outside of school. We were more of just like friends in school. But I only met Rima last year. Also, Alex was a year older than us. Well, one of the art teachers who usually taught the senior class, she just gave birth to her baby, so they decided to mix both of our classes, aka the one that Alex was in. Well, my art teacher decided to pair us all into partners and have us do an art project. So I got paired up with Alex. Fast forward, we end up liking each other and we start dating. And usually whenever Rima and I hung out, we would always hang out over my house, because she said her family was annoying, and Alex and I would only hang out during school, like for part 2. Part 2 about how I didn't know that I was dating my best friend's brother. So like I said, we always hung out at my house because she never wanted to hang out at hers, but this weekend her whole family was supposed to be gone, so she wanted to throw a party. And she was like, OMG, you should definitely invite that guy that you like. Now listen, I know you guys think it's weird that she probably didn't even know that I had a boyfriend. Whenever I had talked to people that were best friends with her before, and yes, multiple best friends. This girl went through best friends like she goes through underwear. They had all said to not let her know who you like or who you're dating, because she would either try to get with them or she would get with them. And if she couldn't get with them, she would just send them nudes out of nowhere. So fast forward, I get to the party. She comes up to me. She's like, I'm so fucking annoyed. My brother's here. And then she was like, oh, did you bring the guy that you like? And I was like, no. And then I walk into the living room and I see my boyfriend. So I go over and I give him a hug and a kiss, and Rima starts screaming at me. After that, she told her brother that I bullied her so that way he would break up with me, and he did.